Okay, can I have your full first, or your full name?
Russell Day.
Your hometown.
Well, I've got three of them. Which one do you want?
All three?
Yeah, all three hometowns.
Well, one of them was Fresno, and the other is Bass Lake, and the other's in Oregon.
Okay, and can I have your rank and branch?
Gunner's mate, first class.
Okay, and the unit that you served in.
Pardon?
What unit did you serve in?
Oh, well, I was just on board ship in the Navy.
Okay, should be in the Navy right now.
What unique experiences did you have during the war?
Well, a lot of them. Which one do you want?
Your
No, I
family?
joined the Navy in 1940. I was 18. And when I left the boot camp, they sent me on board the USS, the West Virginia battleship, and I thought that's where I'd be serving. And when we got over to Pearl Harbor in January, they decided to put me onto the Honolulu, which is the flagship of the cruiser division. And then everything went pretty smooth there in that year because we didn't have any problems. We were just doing maneuvers, and then on December 7th, the attack came, and they decided that it was not a drill. This is the real thing. So they said, I want you to strip ship for action. Well, the first thing we decided to do was to throw the officer's gangway overboard, because we got tired of polishing the brass and on it. And the officer of the deck said, well, I want you to go back and get that. Well, about that time, one of those Japanese dive bombers came down, and just, I mean, if it hadn't have been an armor-piercing bomb with a delayed action, we wouldn't be here. But it hit the edge of the dock, and it hit that gangway we had ship thrown over. And when the thing went off, it went off underwater then and blew a hole in the side of the ship. And so we let the St. Louis was tied up alongside of us, and we threw the lines off so she could get underway. And then we went into dry dock as soon as they got the Pennsylvania out, and they repaired the ship there in the dry dock. And then we went to San Francisco, and we were there about 10 hours, I think, and we took several troop ships to Melbourne, Australia. And when we got back from when we left Australia, we went to Kodiak, Alaska. That's a long trip. And then in Alaska, we did an awful lot of bombarding on the Attu and Adak and some of the islands along there into the Bering Sea. And we would launch these planes off for reconnaissance and to do some scouting for us. And the fog would close in, and they couldn't get any communication to the airplanes or anything because we were on radio silence. So we lost 2 planes that way with their radiomen that probably crashed at sea somewhere. And then after we left Alaska, I think it was in September, no, I guess it was in October we left there. We left Alaska and we went into Mare Island, and they put all new guns on, all new barrels and everything on, because we'd done so much bombarding up there. And then we went from there to Guadalcanal. And we'd been in Guadalcanal, I guess, about 2 weeks when we got in our first engagement there at the Battle of Tarfaranga, which is on the eastern coast of Guadalcanal. And in that battle, we lost, there were 3 heavy cruisers, and we were the only light cruiser in the bunch. And all 3 of those heavy cruisers were torpedoed. One was sunk, one ran aground, and the other one, we don't know what happened to it, but I'm sure it survived. And then from there we went to Kulumbangara, and that's when our bow was blown off. We took a torpedo in the bow, and it was, I guess, from where I was gun pointer in turret 1. And it was about 10 feet between me and the ocean there in the front of the ship, because it just blew, the whole bow just collapsed and went down. And then we figured, hey, we're going to get to go home because they've got to repair this. Well, they sent us to Pearl Harbor, and the intermediate time between the time that the bow was blown off until we got to Pearl Harbor, they had already built a new bow, and they just pulled up alongside of it, cut ours off, welded the other one off, and sent us back to Guadalcanal. And then we got into that battle of Kulumbangara. And when we were in that one there, we took a torpedo dead in the stern. Went right into the stern. But they used a 24-inch torpedoes. Ours were all 21-inch. And I remember I was on the phones there in the turret, and I heard them saying there's a torpedo in the stern. And somebody said, would you repeat that? Well, nobody said a word. Everybody bailed out. And eventually the torpedo worked itself out. And they rolled up a mattress and stuck in the hole, plugged it up. And I guess I think we were in about four or five battles down there. Every one of them was at night. Usually between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning, every one of the battles that we ever got into down there. And we did a great deal of bombarding on the islands there to make room for our troops to get in. And after that, I was sent to gunnery school in San Diego. And I think that's the only 3 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks that I spent there away from the ocean. And then after gunnery school, they sent me on to an attack cargo ship. They asked me when I graduated from the gunnery school, they said, you know, what would you like? And I said, well, I'll take another one of those cruisers on the East Coast. So they put me down for an AKA attack cargo ship in Oakland Estuary, which I wasn't very proud of that. I thought, well, gee, here I am on a 6-inch 47s, and they're putting me on 40 millimeters. But I've finally become accustomed to that because they were pretty. It was a lot less regulation on this attack cargo ship than we had on the with the cruisers. And then we went through the Dutch East Indies, we went through through the Philippines, and the last battle that I recall that we were in was the Battle of Okinawa. We went in there on D-Day, and we'd have to go out every night because and get away from the harbor, because we didn't want to get, the kamikazes were starting to come in there. And when we left there, I ended up in Shanghai, Tsingtao, China in 1945. In 1945, I was in Shanghai, China. And they had set up a program that if you had so many points, you could get your discharge. Well, I had enough points to probably get half the crew off. But I couldn't get a ride home. There was no ships going back to the States. But we had a chief signalman on there that decided that he would signal every ship coming in. Where are you going? Where were you headed? And he finally found a troop ship that was going to San Diego. So we when we got into San Diego, they put me in quarantine because I'd come from China. They thought might have been syphilitis or some dreaded disease. But all of those that were on the other one, they didn't bother to put them in, even though they went from one ship to another. They had been in China, but they didn't have to go into quarantine. And then when I went up for discharge off San Francisco Bay, the Treasure Island, they had that, the service had that, and they offered me chief if I would re-enlist, and I told, you could make me admiral of the fleet, I'm not going to re-enlist. So at that point, I figured I'd served enough time, and I've seen enough of that ocean. I think outside of the time I spent there in Mare Island or in the school, that's the only time I wasn't out at sea.
Thank you.
Thank you.